Hi, everybody. Today we're talking about Chapter 11, Conflict in the Small Group. Let's begin with the definition of conflict. Of course, there is no one definition, but several. Wilmot and Hawker in 2001 defined conflict as a range of negative images that come to people's mind when they say the word, such as war, explosion, struggle, trial, balancing act, and tide. In a small group, this may all happen, not literally, but figuratively speaking. But the connecting factor with all those different scenarios that we call conflict is that members have to communicate with one another in order to be in conflict. Most communication scholars believe that conflict is an expressed, that is verbally communicated struggle among group members. That's Philly in 1975 came up with that simple definition. Conflict happens because group members are interdependent, according to Wall and Nolan in 1987, and it centers on the perception of incompatible goals that influence group member interaction. Anderson, Foster, Kuhn, and McKinney have come up with this definition. Scarce resources and interference from group members can also give birth to conflict, and it also affects group interaction just as incompatible goals can do. Conflict arises when group members try to reach consensus. Dana in 2001 noticed that conflict occurs when group members assign fault to specific members of the group. In other words, when they blame each other for not performing, for not showing up, for not telling. A lot of different scenarios can happen, but if they put blame on one another, of course, that is one definition, one way of seeing conflict. So regardless of its definition, conflict has three aspects, three dimensions: affective, behavioral, and cognitive. So affective is the feelings, the effect that it has. Negative emotions associated with conflict comprise the affective dimension of it. So it always gives you a bitter taste in your mouth, in your memories of group work, so you may want to leave the group if there is conflict. The behavioral aspect can be sometimes very rough. It can be inappropriate behavior, or it can be appropriate behavior, but also unpleasant, usually unpleasant, but sometimes it can be pleasant too. If someone stretches a hand to say that let's move on, let's just resolve this peacefully, that can be behavioral. It is the physical or verbal expression, some action that stems from the conflict itself. And finally, the cognitive dimension of conflict is difference in opinion. So politics is one place where people have cognitive differences a lot of times, and they do not engage in behaviors well. If you don't look at the current situation in our country, you would know that normally politics stays in verbal and rhetorical realms, but it can also turn into something emotional, affective, if you're too closely associated with the realm of politics. So it is one place where cognitive differences exist, and it is important for people to know how to look beyond them and not turn them into behavioral conflict. So types of small group conflict. Now we're talking about small group conflict. This is not something bigger, on a bigger scale, that does not involve a lot of people. It is within a small group. Conflict can still be constructive or destructive. Constructive conflict results in growth, results in resolutions, and it allows the group to gain something out of it. Even friendships, public acknowledgement, pride, satisfaction. If you solve the conflict or if you win a conflict, it gives you the pride. Destructive conflict is leading to embarrassment, dissatisfaction, acknowledgement of the group's public failure or an individual's public failure, and, of course, broken friendships. So these are two aspects. We all know that healthy conflict, healthy disagreement, healthy criticism, even if it's unpleasant, it can lead to better communication, because honesty always helps get better results in a group's task or problem solving. So it is important to note that conflict is one way of avoiding groupthink. If there is disagreement among members, groupthink will not happen. In a group that has conflict, you will never have groupthink. But these are slightly different things. Groupthink is within the group itself. It engages the whole group, and it is a form of decision making or reaching consensus without criticism, without critique of the idea. Whereas conflict is related to the individual. It's not a group thing. It is communication among individuals, relational realm. So it is interpersonal rather than a group thing. So again, I made the comparison between groupthink and conflict, saying that they exclude one another, but you need to remember that groupthink is on the group level, whereas conflict is on the individual level of communication. Types of conflict in a small group can be substantive, affective, procedural, and inequity. Let's just quickly list them all. Substantive is related to facts, interpretations, choices. In other words, it's either the opinion or a fact. It is the substance of the matter that people disagree upon. Affective conflict is feelings, communication, personality traits. It can be disruptive, frustrating, and lowers the result, the end result. It damages your end result, jeopardizes your achievement, your goal, but it is not always about the goal. It can be just about the way people behave. So it is lodged in communication. Procedural conflict is something that, again, from the name itself, it relates to the way people handle things, how they evaluate ideas or confront each other's behavior. So it is centering on procedures. It is the way things are done, and you can disagree with the leadership style and say this was not a good way of firing that person because you had already made a decision, come to the small group, told us that you're going to do that, and then convinced us to support you. So procedurally, not the substance, but the way things are done creates conflict. That's procedural conflict. And finally, inequity conflict is based on a person's feeling or belief that the person contributes more to the group than the group gives back. So each person may feel that way, that the contribution is unequal. So inequity is, it sounds like I'm doing so much work and I'm not seeing anything back. Nobody is helping me, that sort of thing. So we learned about the types of conflict. Now let's learn about handling conflict. How do you handle when there is disruption within your group? So the foundation of this knowledge was laid in 1964 by Blake and Mouton, and then Thomas and Kilman continued in 1974, influencing Rahim, of Rahim and Banoma, develop what we call a taxonomy of 5 conflict handling styles. These styles are based on each member's concern for themselves and the group. So it's my interest versus the group's interest, how much, how strongly I feel about my own interest. It can be low, it can be moderate, or it can be high. Based on those two levels of concern, 5 categories of conflict handling styles have emerged: avoiding, dominating, compromising, obligating, and integrating. And I included a nice link in here within the word struggle, in the very first paragraph of this set of notes. You can click on that and go to the website where this is more about organizational communication, workplace conflict, but still it applies to small group as well. So I drew this chart on which one side, the y-axis, is high and low concern for the self, and the other two are high and low concern for the group. So we see that in the cross section, in the middle of this matrix, we have integrating, obliging, dominating, avoiding. I will go over them one by one, but in the middle is compromising. Compromising person wants to benefit everyone. So avoiding conflict. This style has low concern for the self or the group member. Just avoid, don't care. Dominating, of course, the priority is on the person's own concerns. Compromising, agrees to be agreeable, cares for both sides, all the sides, middle ground should be found. That's why compromising is sitting in the middle of everything. Obliging, members have high concern for each member and look for commonalities among group members. So it is high concern for the group and low concern about the self. Integrating works towards developing a solution that satisfies the needs of all members. So it is high concern for both individual and group needs. And there are some guidelines to how to handle conflict, how to manage conflict. And I'll just do this very quickly because I hope you can read the chapter that has a lot more information. First, we should note that low levels of conflict allow the group to operate better and allow members to stay put, to stay committed. So in groups with lower levels of conflict, people are happier. So you should strive for that. It's not always a healthy thing. Some good amount of conflict or criticism is good, but not too much. Second, conflict may be unrelated to the task. It may completely be on a personal level. Third, sometimes there is no solution to a conflict, and you have to acknowledge that. Sometimes there are things you cannot resolve. Conflict may have short-term and long-term benefits. As I mentioned, one thing is no group thing, but also you may learn things, you may find the critical views beneficial, and conflict has long and short-term consequences. If conflict becomes too strong, you're risking to damage your reputation, your own reputation, the group's reputation, the work doesn't get done, and many other consequences that I hope you will read in the chapter. Thank you and see you next time.